All right, so thanks for the invite. It's been a while since I spoke here, and I'm going to do something a little bit different today than I've normally done in the past. Let me go ahead and see if I can share my screen here. There we go. All right, so there we go. I had my slides in another desktop here in a Mac, and it didn't look like it was picking it up. Anyways, my name is Mike Pfeiffer, and thanks a lot for having me back at the user group. Like was said earlier, I am a Azure MVP. I've been in tech industry over 20 years, and I'm going to do something a little bit different in this talk today. I'm going to talk about building your cloud career for the long term. I've been working in the cloud technically since 2013. I was at Microsoft and I went over to Amazon Web Services, and I've been working in cloud ever since. And also have a lot of perspective to share. So this is going to be more of a higher level talk. So this is not going to be a technical talk. So if this is your first meeting, keep in mind that usually what I do is share a bunch of demos and code samples and stuff, but I'm going to do something a little bit different today. So the plan for this talk is I got about 25, 26 slides, and I'm just going to share a quick backstory. And I'm going to take you into the meat of this presentation, long-term strategy, basically how to treat your career like a business. This was something that I started to do in 2010. So, over 11 years ago now, and it was a big game changer. So I'll kind of share why I decided to do that, how I did that. And I'll give you guys some actionable takeaways, some key takeaways that I think will work, whether it's this year, next year, 3 years, 5 years from now. And then I'll stick around for Q&A at the end. So I'm not going to keep an eye on the chat for now. I'm just going to go through the slides. When I get to the end, I'll take questions. So for me, my origin story, is kind of, I think, similar to a lot of other people. I started in the help desk, but one thing that a lot of people don't know about me is I started, with no experience with computers at all, and I wasn't even really a good student. Like I always struggled in school. I was a top athlete, but I was kind of like the class clown, and especially in high school, I partied all the time. And so I should have spent more time on my grades, and I didn't. And, I did go to college. I played football for a while. I ended up dropping out. So I've always been like a self-directed learner, and I've never really, I was never really like a great student. And so number one, it's kind of like, despite the background, right, there's always ways to do this, but I was able to land a help desk job in 98 without any experience whatsoever. It was a huge game changer. And once I got that job, I realized like, man, this is my shot, because that was when Windows NT was really a big deal. And I knew a lot of people, like friends and stuff, especially people that graduated a couple of years before me. And they were making really good money working in IT, and they were still working through college. And so for me, it was like, all right, this is a huge opportunity. And I decided to really double down on it. Okay. So in that time frame, living in Albuquerque, this is the house I was living in. I was like, I'm going to get certifications, because, everybody I'm hanging around that's succeeding is getting certifications. And I overheard this woman saying that she got her A+ and that she got promoted. And this was at the place where I got that help desk job. So I dedicated myself to certs, and I was studying in this house in downtown Albuquerque, like no heat. It was like a total dump. And I was like, man, I need to get my certs so I can get promoted, move to a new place. And so I went for the NT4 MCSE certification. And one night I was surfing the internet, dial-up internet, and there was an ad for Windows NT5, which was in beta. That actually ended up being Windows 2000. So, I basically ordered the CDs. I started messing around with that. And my experience with Windows 2000 basically got me my first consulting job. So I went in for an interview. It only had like, I don't know, maybe a year of help desk experience. But the hiring manager, he was impressed that I knew Windows 2000, especially Active Directory. And he's like, man, I need people. This new stuff, so I'm going to give you a shot. And that was huge for me. And so that kind of kicked off my career. And so over the next basically decade, getting hired as an IT consultant then in 2000, I spent like 10 years doing IT infrastructure. I worked as a consultant. I worked in sysadmin jobs. I flew all over the world doing big Exchange, Active Directory migrations. I worked as a web developer on and off, especially as like a side hustle. So that's kind of like where I started to learn to code along with doing infrastructure stuff. But when I got to around 2010, I was basically just sitting in a cubicle And I was working at a job that was like really easy for me at that point, and I would get all my work done in like the first hour or two of the day. And I was like, I do not really like where this is going, and I also didn't like the culture of the company I was working at. So I decided, it's time for me to reinvent my career. And then I started looking around, looking at other people that were successful, and I was like, what would I want to do? What I basically came up with was, I wanted to write books, I wanted to speak at conferences and stuff like that. But one of the things I learned from the people that were doing that is they were basically treating their career like a business. Okay. And that's like what I want to talk about today. Okay. So that's kind of why I'm bringing this up, because the last 10 years, 11 years, I've been basically using this framework. And it's, it could be applied by anybody. Okay. So currently, where I'm at now, I did get to my goal. I wrote a bunch of books, a bunch of online courses. I've been a speaker at Microsoft Ignite, AWS reInvent. I've had the opportunity to train people. I've been flying all over the world the past 10 years, doing live workshops and stuff like that. So kind of came a long way in my career, but it was all about, the last decade was really more about strategy, and so that's the big point for today. And if I got any Jay-Z fans out there, I love this meme. You'll like it too. He says, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. And if you take nothing away from this talk other than this, that's really the idea. Your employer has a job to fill, right? And, depending on where you work, they may care a lot about your long-term career, but a lot of places they may not. And, if you can't get that job done, or just put somebody else in that job that is, right? So your responsibility is your career, but your job belongs to your employer, right? So over the next 10 years, 5 years or whatever, when you're planning out long-term strategy, that's what I want to talk about today. It's how do you think about it like a business? And the best businesses in the world, not all of them, because not all of them do this, but the best ones out there always define a clear problem that they're trying to solve. They got a mission. Everybody knows the mission. They got a compelling vision for the future. And then they got values that define the character or the culture of the company. And, so if you're thinking about this like I'm a businessman or businesswoman, you know what I mean? Then you can do all these things. You could do all these things. You should. And what'll happen, I think, over time is you'll have clarity, right? And then you'll have these values to lean on. So I'm just going to break down today. So number one, why do people usually do this? How come people don't usually create big long-term career visions? Well, there's fear of the unknown. Kind of like, there's no steps. Like, what am I supposed to do? Perfectionism is a big part. I know that perfectionism for me, especially 10, 11 years ago, that was a problem because I was, every time I wrote a book or wrote a blog post or taught a class, I got real high standards for myself, but perfection is impossible, right? So it's kind of like people get stuck on that. Cultural conditioning is a big piece because, sometimes depending on your environment, your parents, your friends, the people that you're around, even the companies you're working at, maybe everybody's saying, do it this way, follow this path. And then you end up not really thinking about what you want long term, you're listening to everybody else. So, the things that I'll talk about today will really help with that. So, for example, if you were going to create your own vision statement, here's a couple of basic examples, right? And one thing that I want to underline here is that this doesn't have to be perfect and it can change over time. Mine, was a long, windy road, wasn't perfect. It wasn't like I completely called my shot or anything, but I did have like a big, kind of a long-term agenda, and it was different and it was kind of messy along the way, but I got there. So that's kind of like what I want to start thinking about here is like long-term, what would you want to do? So a vision statement for the future might be something like, not this year or next year, but like real long-term, like massive career success. That might look like me becoming a senior executive at something like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, one of those huge tech companies or something. And then maybe earning $500K a year with salary and bonuses, restricted stock units and whatever, right? That might be one long-term vision for your career. Maybe it'd be more on the other kind of like content side, like a lot of MVPs like us, do courses and books and stuff like that. Maybe you want to do a YouTube channel, with 100,000 subscribers and become a full-time paid content creator, teaching people how to do DevOps in Azure, stuff like that, right? That might be a long-term vision. Mine was simply this. In 2010, I was going to a lot of conferences back then. It was all, everything was face-to-face in those days. And there was a lot of people doing the whole, hey, I wrote a book, and I'm going to go on a speaking tour. And so my goal was to do that. And like I said, a lot of detours along the way. Worked at Microsoft and Amazon along the way, but basically did what I wanted to do. Okay. And so that's what I'm suggesting is, number one, creating a big picture idea of where I want to go. And I'll come back to this in a minute. Now, the other thing that great companies do and that great, people do when they're treating their career like a business is defining core values. And I really did, realize the power of this when I worked at Amazon, because I've also worked at companies, especially back in the old days, where the culture was toxic and there was no clear problem that the company was trying to solve, especially when I worked for like government contractors and stuff. Wasn't always like clear. What are we trying to fix here? We just got a bunch of money on this funding. What are we trying to do? And so when I went to Amazon, it's like, wow, really saw the impact of relentless business culture and what that could do for innovation and just getting stuff done, right? So you can do this as an individual as well. I'll break it down when we get into this a little bit further, but when you have core values determined as a business or as an individual, then this is going to help you attract the right kind of people around you. And it's definitely a good thing when you're interviewing for a tech job and they're looking for culture fit. There's the technical aspects of the interviews of knowing cloud architecture and maybe knowing some Python or things like that. But they're also looking for, is this person going to be a good fit for the team, right? And so the good part about defining your own core values and then embodying those day to day over the long term is it shows up in the stories that you tell in the interviews. And the people are like, wow, I really want to work with this person. Also, core values help you determine, if you're being successful or not in your actions, and I'll explain here in a minute. One example of this that I'll touch on here, Amazon's core values, they call these their leadership principles. And anytime somebody goes to apply at Amazon and gets an interview, and they go through phone screens and then finally get to the interview loop, they got to interview with like 6-7 different people. Those folks are going through all the leadership principles that Amazon has to determine, is this person somebody that embodies these principles? And every big company has something like this, Netflix and Microsoft and Google. So those are really good places to look for ideas. I'll share mine as well, but one of the big things that's really good about these is if you make a list of like your core values and then you start living by them, they're really great anchors when it's time to make a decision. So you might end up getting some opportunities coming your way. And if you don't have a clear vision of where you're trying to go, those opportunities could be enticing, right? Might trick you to go down the wrong road if you didn't have something already kind of like figured out that you were working towards. The other thing is conflicts that come up all the time, right? There's constantly conflicts between teams. And, these values that you've got and the vision that you've got for your own career, coming back to these when those opportunities come in, when those conflicts come up, it helps you understand how to handle that. Okay. So anytime I'm like, I got a business opportunity or I've got some kind of conflict, like team member or contractor or something like that, I'm always leaning on my vision of what is it I'm trying to do. And what about my values? And I don't want to compromise my values when I'm making these decisions. You know what I mean? And again, like having these figured out and living by them will make sure that they show up in your stories that you're telling in interviews later. And I'm not going to read through my whole list here. I want to send the deck and that'll get attached with this. You can also hit me up like, LinkedIn or something if you want a copy. But, things like empathy and, really considering multiple perspectives That's a big one in tech these days because a lot of people don't do that. And, you don't want to be the person that can't compromise ever. You want to be somebody that's seen as, all right, let me consider all perspectives and make sure that the people I'm talking to feel heard. So number one for me is empathy. Number two, laser focus. Like I'm not, just like distracted by basic stuff. I've got a very detailed, built out calendar. I know what I'm supposed to be doing every day, that kind of stuff. So again, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you because everybody should define their own values. But for me, these are my anchors. So when there's an opportunity or there's a conflict, I always check in with these. And if I'm not doing these, that's a huge problem for me. And then I got to fix it. Like number 5, for example, radical ownership. That's a good one to adopt because, it keeps you from blaming everybody else. If you just adopt the idea that, most of the time you can find a creative solution and it makes no sense and does nothing of effort or adds no value to complain and blame others, then you go in a little bit of a different direction, right? And so it's like tiny, small things to help keep you kind of in a better alignment. This just this kind of stuff that works for me. However, if I'm interviewing people and these are the values for my company or these were the values for Amazon, I'm listening to the stories that you're telling and I'm looking for these things. And if I'm picking up on the fact that there's no ownership, I know that's going to be a problem for me later on the team. You know what I mean? So anyways, spend some time in addition to creating a long-term vision, spend some time thinking about what would be your core values. And, the interesting thing with like Amazon's leadership principles, these are all Jeff Bezos' personal core values, right? At least they were in the beginning. The list has changed a little bit over the years, but that dude's pretty successful, right? So that might be a good place to start. Now, in addition to all this, check the clock here. Oh yeah, we're doing good on time. In addition to, understanding where you're trying to go, understanding what your values are, then you need to commit to deliberate practice. Okay, so I'm going to go through these individually, a quick punch list, develop a growth mindset, embrace a scientific method, be a master and not a dabbler, and then implement daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly practices. So here's what I mean by that. Number 1, growth mindset. Kind of a basic one, but this is like, it's so huge because anytime somebody is saying no, if they haven't tried something, they're just kind of cutting off possibility, right? And this woman, Carol Dweck, her name's on the slide here, she wrote a book called Growth. She's a PhD over at University of Pennsylvania, I think. But, it's a huge book, so you don't have to read it. Basically, the idea is that you need to adopt a growth mindset, and a lot of people don't. A lot of people assume that intelligence is static, and that's just not the case. It's really more about, it really comes back to the values, honestly. So if your values are set up in a way that embrace a growth mindset or promote a growth mindset, you'll be better off. So, if you're not flexible, if you're not willing to listen to other people, if you get intimidated by other people being successful, that's a fixed mindset. And you want to be open to challenges, and you want to have perseverance when there's obstacles, and you want to learn from criticism and all that kind of stuff. So real simple, but you want to be open to possibility. You want to be, somebody that has a can-do attitude, The other thing here that I put on the list was experimentation, scientific method. Probably wondering, like, what are you talking about? Well, one of the things I've just noticed just for myself over the years and also talking to other people is that a lot of people are just worried about getting, having a failure and having kind of like a failure like on their record, right? And it's just, we're working in an industry where you can't do that, right? So instead of failure, just remember that you're just experimenting, right? And that's the whole point is, just doing the scientific method. So if you remember this from school, really just a basic process. Number 1, you have an observation or a question, or this might just be, you're learning something about Azure. So I wonder what would happen if we did this. And it's really just going through the scientific method. So you ask a question, you research, you form a hypothesis, you go off and do a test, You look at the data that comes back from that without judgment and without beating yourself up, and then you decide, did that work or do we go again? You just want to constantly be doing this. Like every time you do something, like if you're going to pass the AZ 104 exam to become an Azure administrator, at your study process, as you go through the bullet list of concepts, would be this, because you're probably going to read the thing and be like, oh, I don't know what that means. So then you run through an experiment, maybe spin up a lab, go deploy some infrastructure, kick the tires, and then not beat yourself up if it doesn't work, right? Because then you just run another experiment, try to figure out what happened. You know what I mean? So it's a basic idea, but you want to step in to the unknown, embrace failure, and treat it like you're a scientist, right? Don't worry about getting it wrong. The other big thing here, master versus dabbler. So the master is really the person that, going back to this, they're going to be sitting here running scientific method all day. Oh, I wonder what would happen if I deploy this with an ARM template. I wonder if I did it with Terraform implementation, things like that, right? So the master is ridiculously patient. Master is, cool with struggling, got a growth mindset, is expecting some adversity, and they're playing a long game. Dabblers, the biggest problem with the dabbler is seeking instant gratification. Okay, so, and this happens just, when you're trying to get stuff done, like go off and look at YouTube or whatever, but also this happens when people learn. And have this ever happened to you? Like you're learning something cool about cloud. It's kind of fun and exciting, and then time goes by and it's not as fun as exciting as it used to be. Well, that's because, when you're learning, a lot of times you're getting all these neurochemicals. It's like real fun, right? It's kind of like you're getting some instant gratification when you're learning. But, the master will just keep going, even if they're not getting that, because that's what it takes, right? So in terms of long-term thinking and planning your career for the long term, you want to be the master, not the dabbler, okay? So sometimes you just kind of like got to deal with it, To make the point, I actually saw this meme last night, and I was like, hey, that's perfect for my little talk tomorrow night. Usain Bolt won 8 gold medals in 3 Olympics. He only ran for less than 115 seconds, earned $119 million. That's the economy of effort. But for those 2 minutes, he trained for 20 years. That's investment. Think long term. Patience pays off. So that's like what I would think about in career, right? In your career, these things that you want to achieve, it's going to take a while. And in order to get them done, you want to commit to deliberate practice, right? So doing all the things I said before, but also I would recommend having practices or routines to help you get there. Daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly, and yearly. And so what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. For me, I have a daily routine. So I get up real early. I have space in the morning where no one's bothering me. And then I can work on whatever it is that I want to do. If I'm trying to build my personal brand, build my YouTube channel, work on my podcast or whatever, I have some time in the day where I don't have to just roll out of bed and start putting out fires at work. Okay. I got weekly routines where I'm like, hey, I got to map out my calendar. So I know that I'm, getting my thing done to promote my career. Maybe every month or every quarter, update my resume. Maybe every year I try to take a month off. That's what I've been trying to do lately. I haven't actually done it yet, but 2019, well, actually in 2020, I was able to take most of December off. 2019 a little bit. So that's, I don't know, that's kind of a weird one. But anyways, think about practices, things that you can do consistently that will get you to where you want to go long term, because it's always about, the small incremental marginal gains. And if you ever heard that expression, death by 1,000 cuts, that's actually what failure is. It's usually not like a big one-time thing. It's like you were supposed to do like 100 things over the course of, however long, and you didn't. So that's kind of what I would recommend. Now, the last big one here, probably the most powerful one. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Personal branding. And I've seen some massive career success, even in a short time frame, by doing this, especially lately, because there's so much opportunity. There's so much job openings. It's crazy. And I would totally get into this. If you haven't started doing personal branding, I'm going to do a little demo here. Nothing crazy, but it's super powerful right now. It's always powerful, but right now it's really good because there's so much opportunity in the job market. But number one thing you want to remember about personal branding is that this isn't about a logo or a tagline. Your brand as an individual is just a promise on delivering value. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy or stress you out or burn you out working 12 hours a day or anything. But it can be uncomfortable in the beginning because, you're kind of like putting yourself out there for the first time. It can be a little unnerving. It can be a little weird to go and build out your profile on LinkedIn to put a nice photo and spend some time writing up your bio. That is kind of uncomfortable at first, but it is something you should definitely do. Third bullet point here says understand the difference between inbound and outbound marketing. Because if you think about it, if you're treating your career like a business, you're really marketing your own personal brand when it comes to wanting opportunities in the job market. And I can promise you, it's much easier when you got the people coming to you versus you having to go out and convince them that you're the right person. Okay. So even with a little bit of personal branding, people just start coming at you like crazy. I've seen it. I'm going to explain more, but last thing down here, I think everybody should do if you haven't already is double down on LinkedIn big time. All right. So on that note, let me see here. If I can get my browser up. Head over to LinkedIn real quick. All right. So let me look at guys I know like Andre. Andre's an awesome guy. I know him personally, and I'm just picking on him because I know he does an awesome job on LinkedIn. Yeah.
We are still seeing your PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. I might need to stop sharing. I must have shared the app only. There we go. Can you see LinkedIn?
Yes.
All right, cool. So Andre's a friend of mine, and he's just a good example because he's done some basic personal branding. It's been really good for him. So, he's got a nice picture, nice image over here, put a title, all that kind of stuff, filled out his bio. But, he's just sharing his certifications and stuff like that, and just kind of telling the story of what he's working on. And if you look at his posts, he's just kind of going out here and saying, I got a new video on YouTube. You can see he's sharing his journey here. And you don't have to do video. That can be kind of intimidating. But, if I show you mine, go to my feed here. Sometimes I'll just post stuff like, let me find an older one. Yeah, for example, like this one. You see this one? It's a while back, but I was just sharing documentation out of Microsoft's, the docs or whatever. You probably see people do this like crazy, but what I'm trying to explain here is that everybody should get into this. So if you're watching this right now and you're not heavy on LinkedIn, what I would do is get in there, set up your profile, put a nice picture where you're smiling, fill out your bio, put a nice background image, all that kind of stuff. And then maybe start sharing on here and explaining, what it is you're working on. You don't have to come in here like you're the authority, everything or anything like that, but you could just kind of do what Andre was doing or what other people in the industry are doing, which is just sharing what they're learning and sharing, hey, I just took the test or I'm studying for the exam and so on and so forth. And you can just share stuff right out of the documentation too, where, I think one day I was looking around, I saw this blog post and it was insanely useful. And so remember I was talking about when you're building your brand, it's a promise on delivering value. And so I'm sitting here looking at this article, I'm like, geez, it's goes into super depth on Azure Sentinel. So I just bookmark it and then I share it with my network. And then everybody's like, man, that's awesome, right? And what you're doing when you're personal branding is, proving to the market that you are somebody that delivers value, but, you start to build relationships with people. That's another huge thing on LinkedIn. That's what you want to do, especially when it comes to building a long-term career, is having a lot of people in your network. Because when it comes time to go for the new opportunity or the next opportunity, you want to have a lot of people offering to help you out or just available if you need them, so you can reach out to them, right? So one thing you can do with these, if you're just sharing what you're working on and stuff, You don't have to do this every day or either. You can just schedule your posts. If you have a weekly practice, remember I was talking about practices, daily, weekly, monthly, that kind of stuff. I used to have a weekly practice where on Sundays I would take like 5 different blog posts, and then I would use this tool called Buffer. It's a social media scheduling tool. And I think they got a free version too. Yeah, it's free. And they got little plugins. So I would just like five blog posts on a Sunday, sit there for like an hour, and I come over here with the extension. I would like schedule it, and just type a little caption. Might upload a different image if I want to. Just tell my network, hey, everybody, this is awesome. Go check it out. And if you do that on a consistent basis of some kind, whether it's every Tuesday and Thursday or every Wednesday, if at least once a week, right? And you're kind of beating that drum consistently, but slowly, and have realistic expectations on your long-term investment, and start building your network on here. It's super powerful. And I started posting on LinkedIn every day, I think in 2018 or 2019, and just like 30,000 followers or something like that. You want to build your network. That's going to just create massive amounts of opportunity for you. All right, so let me share my slides again. I'll wrap it up here pretty soon, and we'll do some Q&A. All right. Seeing the slides again? Yeah? Okay. All right. So, I only had one more slide. Perfect. So key takeaways. This is the punch list. I know I kind of covered a lot, but this is really what it is. Key takeaways. Create a career vision statement. Where do you want to go long term, right? You might just be in the help desk right now, or you might be, in the very beginning stages of your cloud journey. You might be in a different sector of IT or a different part of IT, and you want to get into cloud. So in step 1 here, creating a vision statement for yourself, like go big with this, like really dream up something cool that you would really want to do, and be okay with knowing that it can change as time goes on. Number 2, map out some core values that you can lean on, that are winners, winning patterns, right? Like the ones I got in the deck are good. The ones in Amazon's leadership principles are good. But you want to have those and live by them. It doesn't work if you just do the exercise of write them down, but actually live by them. And I promise you, it'll make you a culture fit for the biggest companies in the world. Number 3, commit to deliberate practice, mainly doing, the daily, weekly, monthly practices. And that is, it's very subjective and it's very individual, because mine are going to be different than yours. If you're currently in a support position and you have to be up at 7 in the morning and people are constantly, bugging you for help, that's going to be a little bit harder, right? Maybe. And so you might have to have your own protocol, but you should have some kind of deliberate practices in addition to just studying and passing exams. But how will you build your brand, right? How will you grow your network, which are the last 2? And that's really the answer from what my experience has been over the last decade or so. And I will just keep doing this personally. Like, I'm just going to keep doing this. I know it'll keep working. So that is my presentation. I'd love to open it up for Q&A.
That's so nice, Mike. I have a question for you though, before anyone else jumps in. I've been approached by many people too. So one of the things I have noticed is if they are working on a job which uses Azure or AWS or any cloud to name it, they do generally are interested in building their career in cloud. But I have been approached by folks who don't get opportunities at their workplace to work on in cloud. So I just somehow feel they tend to miss the motivation. How can they get started if they don't get the opportunity at their workplace?
That's an awesome question. I was actually in the same boat. When remember the slide where I was showing the old beat up house and the white box PC? Like when I was studying for my NT4 certification, I was just on the help desk and I didn't have any gear. So I went to eBay and all kinds of different places and bought white box PC parts. And I built enough stuff to have like a primary domain controller, a backup domain controller, so I could study for the NT4 certs. And then when I was getting my Cisco certs a couple of years later, I was literally buying Cisco gear off of eBay. And then, it was like 100 degrees in my office at my house. And when when I got into cloud, before I worked at Amazon, I was paying the bill on my own. So like this big reason why I made this presentation, which is, and I mentioned it, your career is your responsibility. Like if your employer, if your work isn't giving you cash to burn cloud credits, then, you got to find a way to get in there somehow, and you might have to become resourceful. There's lots of
what I heard from you, Mike, is certainly a great point. I mean, certifications offer a great roadmap for someone who wants to get started. Even if they don't have opportunities at work, they can certainly follow that roadmap, pick up whatever interest they have, and then follow that certification.
Yeah, you just start where you can. You go to Microsoft Learn, where they've got some access to where you can practice in a subscription, get your certs, and then, maybe start budgeting for your own cloud spend, or really, if you're working at a place, really start advocating for dev test subscriptions or MSDN subscriptions, which if a good employer, that'd be a red flag too. If you work at a place and they're like not willing to give you a sandbox, I would be skeptical about that.
I've heard from few people what they do is they have these subscriptions like Pluralsight or a Cloud Guru. These subscriptions come with those sandbox environments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you've got Pluralsight and all the labs and all that kind of stuff, and you're not using it, huge mistake. You got to get in there. So set up your practices. Like maybe have a weekly practice where you're like, I'm going to do an hour of labs every week, and I might have to carve it out through a few days a week. It's kind of like being in athletics in a way, in my mind, right? It's kind of like, this is super competitive industry. It's super hard, man, with all the data coming at us. So you have to I think if you really want to crush it, you got to kind of train like an athlete a little bit, but you don't have to burn yourself out. So if you're detailed, I think that you can do it in a way where, you're not working 20 hours a day.
I guess another misconception is people either stay at 0 or they strive to be 100. I mean, there is practically no human being who understands each and every Azure service out there. So I think the key is go and identify your area, your skill set, where you fit in perfectly, and just focus on that subset of services and get started.
Yeah. When I was hiring people on AWS, and even now when I hire contractors and stuff, that's what I'm looking for is, can I just hand them the ball and be confident that they'll find a way, whether it's on their own or getting help from somebody else, because I know 100% no one is going to know every single answer, especially me. I know that from experience too.
I'll let Thomas speak. I know, Thomas, you were raising your hand. Did you want to ask something to Mike or probably say something else? You can unmute yourself. That's right. I saw your hand raised, so I was not sure if you wanted to ask something. And just not Thomas, anyone on the call, if you would like to ask anything, and I can share a small story of myself. Mike might remember. It was November 2019. I was not MVP. I was attending Ignite, and I met Mike there because I was following Mike since then, before then through Twitter and LinkedIn. And I really saw him as an inspiration. I wanted to do what he was doing. I wanted to really become a speaker. I really wanted to be part of MVP community, and I did approach him, and whatever he's sharing today, he did share exactly the same things with me, that be consistent, develop those practices, keep those contributions regular. And even to add to that, even if you follow Scott Henselman, to Mike's point, what he was saying around those practices, Scott Henselman also mentions the same thing about consistency. If you will ask Scott, he always talks about his blog post. He has been blogging since last 10, 15, 20 years. He has been podcasting since I don't know how many years, and he will only let you know that it's all about his consistency. And initially looks like what he says is initially first 4 or 5 years, no one really visited his blog or he didn't have enough traction. But he was, just because he was consistent, it started paying off, and now he is where he is. So Cancelman's a really good example. I remember reading his blog post like in 2007, when I was doing like ASP.NET web forums and stuff.
But yeah, I mean, it's true. That's how you build the leverage is by the consistent branding. And yeah, it's uncomfortable. And not everybody has to do it, but if you do it, you're going to have more leverage. But yeah, like having consistent practices, even if you're not branding, is so powerful. And how long did it? I guess it took what, like a year for you. How long did you spend like really building up everything? Because you built this user group, you became an MVP. But how long did all that take?
At least 16 months, I guess, minimum.
Yeah,
But it's an ongoing activity. It was not
yeah,
like I got the MVP award, so I should stop working or I should just close the user group. I mean, it was more about commitment. I mean, I was really impressed with the turnover in this user group. I mean,
hmm
when COVID hit us, I have only conducted 2 meetings in person and then pandemic has hit us. And I was shattered. I was like, no, man, what else can go bad? I was really looking for this as an opportunity to contribute to community, and pandemic is blocking me from conducting these meetings in person. But here we are. We are
yep,
almost over a year now. We have been conducting these meetings over Teams, and there has been a great turnover. People have been joining us, which is great. I'll read out some of the comments people are posting on the chat. So John is saying, great job. So glad I attended. Well done. I have had experience with young developers thinking some of their ideas were not how we do that, then realizing they aren't encumbered with the baggage. And their perspective was new and refreshing. So I agree, let new ideas flow and remember to experiment. Absolutely, John. Mike, you want to add something to what John is saying?
yeah. I mean, a good experiment would be for all of you, that are new to cloud, which I'm assuming. This is a great place to start networking too. And this call is awesome every month, but maybe, when I ran the PowerShell user group here in Phoenix with Jason Helmick, who is now program manager on the PowerShell team, we had a small team, but as it grew, like people within the group would like break off and build their own little teams. So, this is an awesome place for you to find like-minded people and study together, maybe, accountability partners to like say, hey, did you do your thing last week like you said you were going to do? Or you just get together and bounce ideas off each other and attack stuff as a team and fill up your GitHub profile with like, sample stuff that you can talk about in an interview. So yeah, that's how I would like experiment and network at the same time. So thanks, John. I appreciate the comment.
Okay, the next one is a question. What keep you in check with your values? How do you stay focused? Do you have any tips to share? Procrastination can sometimes be strong.
Yeah, it is. And oh, it's weird. Did I lose you?
No, we can
Oh,
see.
okay. Meeting thing locked up for a second. Yeah, so I think a couple things. So number one, it took me a long time to like after I wrote my core values, it took me a long time to like start living them and then like for it to start becoming automatic. So step one is like, you got to walk or, crawl before you can walk and all that kind of stuff. So one step at a time, but start by creating the list. And then as conflicts come up or opportunities come up, you're referencing your core values, right? And eventually it's like just in your mind. So something's happening. It's like, no, I got to take ownership because that's what I do. That's my character, and it's not easy. And the other thing that you mentioned there was like, you're going to procrastinate, not feel like doing it. And that's 100%. Anybody that you see out there that's successful is only successful because they're still doing stuff when they don't feel like it. So motivation and wanting to do the work isn't always going to be there. That's why having an important vision of what you're trying to accomplish is so important, because without it, it's just so easy to stay in bed, and not get out of bed when you're supposed to and stay under the covers, But if you have a compelling reason, then that makes it a little bit easier for me.
I read in one of the books, Mike, what they suggest is to create what is known as a vision board.
Yeah.
So what they
Absolutely.
say is just keep it in front of your bed. So the very first thing when you wake up, it should just be on the front wall so that you can see it the very first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Ms. Brown, the motivational speaker, says whatever you think and see in first 20 minutes of your day defines your day.
I
So
love that. Yeah. And that's like a great daily practice, right? Which would be going back to your vision, whether it's like a true vision board or just like your notes or whatever, and do that first because that does happen. And that used to happen to me too. When I first started my career, I would stay up all night learning, like coding and learn how to do stuff. And then I would oversleep most of the time. And I would have to wake up and go straight into work. And usually the phone was ringing off the hook because something wasn't working. And so the mornings for me, for like probably the first decade, were for somebody else. And that's a problem.
I think one of the reasons for procrastination for me is when I have to write a blog post or create a video, I feel probably someone else already have it outside. Why should I
Oh
be?
yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. When that doesn't matter. So that's a good one. Like, and that's the cool part about doing this type of stuff is you can weave in your own little perspective of, tell the story of why you're teaching this. Like I learned this the other day and it kind of was weird. So here's how I figured it out. And that's what people want to know is like how you figured it out. Like what's your take on it? And so like don't worry if it's already out there because it is. And you just got to stop thinking about that. And the other thing I'll add to your point about being procrastination and stuff is that that doesn't last very long. It's only there until you start. Once you start, the pain of the procrastination goes away.
It
And that's a
reminds me,
mental
reminds me,
trick. Yeah.
reminds me of one of my friend who always, who goes to work out every day. He says people only struggle to reach gym. They don't really struggle to do workout. Once they reach gym,
That's it.
they do all the workouts. So the struggle is to actually step out of your home and go to gym.
That's exactly it, man. It's just get going. And then once you're there, all right, it's much easier. Yeah. 100%.
I'll join two more questions. There are two people who have asked questions. It's around books and podcasts. The
Mhm.
first one is any books, podcasts, recommendations to keep learning tech and career. And the second one is how do you focus your learning with so many great blogs, YouTube channels, content in general? I find it harder now than ever before to really drill into one topic and stick with it before you feel drawn to another. When is it time to move from one to the next? So essentially, what should be the learning tools that people can use?
Yeah. So I would say I'll answer the second question first. Um, sorry, long pause. I was kind of thinking about it. I guess the way that I do it these days, it's so chaotic right now, and there's just too much stuff. And I guess what I've been doing the last couple of years that's worked has been sticking to the role-based certifications and staying in those lanes. Like, so let me give you an example. If I was traditionally more of an infrastructure person, right now I'd probably focus more on the administrator and architect certs versus maybe DevOps and developer, not because those don't have merit, but because my current skill set maps to those other Azure services and administration much closer. And it's going to be easier right now. But long term, I may want to go down the developer road, but I might need to learn a language or get better with the language before I dive into that. So I think for me, since it's so chaotic right now, that's what I've been doing because the only sure bet is cloud, right? But there's things in cloud like Kubernetes and serverless and all this stuff that maybe it's a good bet, maybe it's not. We don't know yet. So that's what I would do is start kind of where you're at. What are you currently doing? Are you an administrator or are you a developer? And then maybe start in the role-based stuff. And also remember that's not always going to be like super fun and sexy. It might be kind of boring sometimes. So go to the certs is what I would say. But also the inverse to that, and I'll stop, is get hands-on and prove hands-on. And GitHub, even getting just like one or two repos where you can show that, you've connected the dots a little bit, that goes a long way.
And I think I'll go back to one of your slides around be a master. And rather than quantity, focus on quality. There are 300, 400, 500. I don't track how many services Azure offers today.
Mm-hmm.
Practically, no one, as I was saying earlier, no one will really know about everything about every service. So just identify your key area. And I think as Mike said, role-based certifications are great to start.
Yeah, and the one thing I used to say all the time a couple of years ago, I haven't really been talking about it much, but it's probably a good point. I always used to tell people focus on compute, networking, storage, and identity. because those are like the pillar services. So compute, networking, storage, and identity. And if you get good with those, everything else is built on top of that. So that's kind of what I used to say a lot. What was the book question? Were they asking for a technical book or something else, more career focused?
They didn't say anything. I mean, just about your learning. How do you learn? I think the question would be more towards cloud. One resource, I think, Mike, you did presented last year as well in the group on Azure Architecture Center. I think if anyone is aspiring to be a cloud architect, I think Azure Architecture Center is a great resource.
Yeah. The books get out of date pretty fast on the technical side. So if you're doing those, I would try to find one where they're like the author is doing an early release and you can follow along with it and all that. Because sometimes too, they've got like O'Reilly and Manning or two publishers that are doing that, I think. And I think they're working on labs too on both of those, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd try to find a more modern publisher, I guess is what I'm saying on the books, because books are so like, just hard to keep up to date. And then anything outside of tech, I would just read leadership books, even though you might not think of yourself as a manager. You may think that I never want to be a manager, but you should understand the leadership principles that, because, if you kind of have the value system of a leader, even if you're just a practitioner in the field, it'll really serve you. And then you'll be a great culture fit for a place like Amazon or Facebook or Microsoft or whatever.
Sure. And I did post the link to the book Mindset, the one that you referred in your slide. So that's also a good book to start with. Even Satya Nadella has, I believe, referred to that book in one of his keynotes.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Because a lot of the mental traps, I think, that keep people from doing the long-term type of stuff like this are addressed in that book, because it's fixed mindset stuff.
And again, my opinion is, I mean, it's Mike's vision to be a speaker or to be, public speaker, or he's trying to build his brand in this direction. But you can have a different vision altogether, as Mike was mentioning in his slide.
So. Yeah, don't. You should be going for what you want, not what you see other people. And like, oh, that must be the way. Yeah, and it should speak to you. So if you might want to run a big team someday or whatever, think about it and it might take some time to come up with the answer. It did for me. That's why I spent so much time working different jobs and working at Microsoft and trying out Amazon and stuff. So I was just trying to find what do I like? And, you don't always have to bounce around companies. You could find that out by doing experimentation. Like 1 week I'll do serverless, and then a couple weeks later I'll do some Kubernetes. You know what I mean? So eventually you'll probably find something where you're like, all right, that's the passion. I want to go into that.
Sure. So hey, Mike, sorry, go ahead, Greg.
I liked the second half of Brian's question there too. How do you know, personally, what's your key off for when it's time to move on to the next thing? Like if you've mastered what you wanted to learn and you want to move on to something else, how do you know that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's I'm listening to my intuition, and I'm trying to find a way to explain that better. Let's see. So here's an example. When I was at Amazon, I did a lot of what I was talking about in the personal branding inside the company, because I wanted to elevate my position there to increase my opportunities. And I ended up getting into a situation where I was on the phone every day because everybody in the company wanted to talk to me, because I was writing white papers and stuff. And this was a long time ago, but I got fairly well known at the time inside Amazon, and kind of became the victim of my own success. And so I was really crushing it, but I was on the phone 8 hours a day, and then I still had to go write code. And then so that was kind of a friction point, as I was in meetings constantly. And then also my manager that I had for a few years there went to another team, and that was a big deal for me because I love that guy. So, my values are what I look at, right? So it's I value my personal time with my family. I value my team and my, the culture of my team and my manager. And if those things aren't really lined up to what I want anymore, or if I feel like I've figured it out, then I'm going to listen to that and I'm going to move on to the next thing. And I'm not going to listen to the judgment of everybody else, because if you do that, usually the people steer you down the wrong road. And so I don't know if I answered your question. It's kind of hard, right? It's always very circumstantial for each person.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Sure. I have a poster. You can't see it. It's over here. It says "Don't compromise." And I used to compromise a lot, especially in the early days when I was trying to get opportunities. Now I have the luxury to not compromise as much. So that's probably like the shortest answer. I'm at this point, I'm very, very rarely going to compromise on my values for anything. And that's kind of how I know when it's time to like not do something.
Louis has listed another great learning tool called as cloudskills.io.
Oh yeah. I didn't really promote that, did I? Thanks, Luis. So yeah, I do run cloudskills.io. We've got courses over there on all kinds of different stuff, and then also cloudskills.fm podcast, which we need to do episode together. I can't believe we haven't done one, but we should do that. But yeah, go check us out over there, and I got some other interesting stuff in the works too. So keep an eye on me. Hit me up on Twitter and LinkedIn as well, especially LinkedIn. I'm going to be posted on there a lot more lately, or coming up soon.
Yeah. Do check out Mike's episodes with Tim Warner.
Oh, yeah.
Legend.
Tim Warner's awesome. Yeah, Tim Warner's done a bunch of stuff with us over at Cloud Skills, a bunch of podcast episodes and tons of trainings. We just did AZ700, which is the Azure networking content. It's the certification's in beta. So latest podcast episode is out about that. So me and Tim are on that one if you go check it out. And then there's a new one coming out tomorrow or Friday.
Okay. Next question, Mike. I know you might be running late, but
yeah, I can do 5 more minutes or so, and then I got to bail out of here.
I see 2 more questions. The first one is, what was that tool you used to track blog posts?
Oh, the tool to track blog posts.
That's right.
To like to schedule it. Yeah, Buffer. Yeah, so buffer.com, and you just get a free account, install the extension, and then when you're surfing. Oh, by the way, I always subscribe to emailed newsletters. Like if I land on somebody's blog and they're like, join my newsletter, and boom, I'm subscribing, because I create a folder in my inbox, and every time somebody sends me an article, it's always in there, right? And so I can go into that and then go to, open it in a browser. I'm like, that's a cool post. And then I schedule a buffer and share it on my LinkedIn, and boom, add a bunch of value to my network later on down the road. And you could even tag the author if you want to go that far. And that'd be a good, professional networking situation. Oh, what's up, Brian? Got his hand raised.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hey, Brian. Yeah.
Hey. Yeah, I figured I'd ask this one over the audio here, but inevitably, if you're good at what you do on the technical side and you're thinking bigger picture and helping the organization, when leadership or management roles become available, there's somewhat of an expectation that you apply or you kind of get pushed in that direction. If you still want to stay technical, what's your recommendation in handling that? Obviously you want to still pursue your career, and there's probably higher salaries and things available going into the management realm, but I really don't want to lose connection to getting your hands dirty and still doing the work. And I just don't know if you've ever been presented with those options, and if you turn them down, it doesn't look good either, right? And so it's just kind of a difficult spot to figure out. I feel like you come to this fork in the road with your career, whether you stay technical or start to disconnect from that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll admit I'm going through it right now, to be honest. I'm not like doing as much technical stuff as I used to. And luckily I've got such a breadth of experience. It's not as bad. It's like I can let it slip a little bit. But I worked at the guy I worked for at Amazon always used to talk about the management lobotomy. He's like, man, I got the management lobotomy. And he would like go in sometimes on Saturdays and just like do stuff technical so he would keep his skills sharp. But I don't think there's an easy answer. But what I would do is, if you feel pressured at the companies you're working at, I would just have an honest conversation with them and just tell them, my interest is in staying as deep technical as possible. And if you can offer a way to support the team without being the manager, and ask that question and be like, I'm really interested in helping the company and helping the team, but I'm also real passionate about spending the majority of my time on the technical stuff. Is there something I can do as a leader to help the team, but not actually have to run the team? And I would just have a very frank conversation with them. And if they, aren't willing to engage in a conversation like that, that might be a red flag, right? Like that might be a fixed mindset in a way for management. So I would just be honest, man, and just tell them, what you're looking to do, because the reality is people are so desperate for talent. And if you're real good technically, you're not going to, you're not going to have any lack of opportunities if you move. But yeah, it's a tricky one, right? Because it's like, it's kind of like a catch-22, but and it kind of reminds me also of the catch-22 of DevOps. Of you want to be a developer and an operations engineer, but if you can hang on to those two opposing ideas somehow, right, is super powerful. So I would kind of like, that's what I would say to you. Is there a way that you can maybe do a little bit more leadership stuff, but not fully commit to it, and still hold both of those at the same time?
And do you think you sacrifice your long-term earning potential if you try to stay in that realm, right? Can you make as much and have as much of an impact in your career staying technical versus starting to go the management track, right?
Yeah, I think that it becomes harder as your career goes on, because for someone like me that's going to be 46 this year, I got to think about ageism and competing with younger people, right? So it's like, it is going to get harder for me to stay technical, and it's going to be easier for me to go higher up the chain by going into management. So I think that is the truth. I think that right now, the way it is, like as time goes on, well, from where I'm sitting right now, I would say that earning potential is best long term going into some kind of management or leadership capacity. But I don't think that it always has to be purely management. I think that new opportunities will be created, and you'll still be able to do some technical stuff depending on the place. But yeah, I mean, right now, I think that my personal earning potential is much higher going into management. And I would imagine if you've been around for a while, you're probably in a similar position. But it doesn't mean you can't do the deep technical stuff. It's just probably going to be harder to keep up for the long term. Because like, how many decades could you keep grinding? I know for me that like I can't grind as hard the next 15 years like I have the last 15. There's no way.
Just my 2 cents, I feel even if you want to be super technical, you can still, if earning money is one of the criteria, you can make really good money by being a content creator.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, to be honest, like I've made probably more money in the last 5 years doing content than I made at doing, the other stuff the first 15. And so when I was answering that question, I was just thinking like working corporate. But yeah, I mean, if you stay technical and you have a stream of income because you got Pluralsight or LinkedIn Learning or whatever, yeah, I mean, big time money. So that's a different conversation. So I'm sorry I didn't bring that up, but yeah, that's a really good point. If you want to get into creating content, the sky's the limit.
Max, I know you wanted to ask something, but I want to read out one last question from the chat. Thomas says, how do you overcome the lack of experience in cloud in an interview? I have AZ 303, 304, 104, and 900 certs, along with AWS certs. However, my current job doesn't use any cloud services.
Yeah, I've seen this come up a bunch, and I've seen people succeed big time, especially this year. I was just on a call last Friday where a guy was giving a talk about how he used LinkedIn to land a job. So what I would do, you've already got the certs. I would get into LinkedIn and I would start branding yourself. I would start sharing the story of the certs that you've taken, how you did it, and what'll happen. And also be open to accepting connections, especially from recruiters. And invariably, and if you follow the other folks here, and comment on other people and start networking, you're going to get like an influx of recruiters, and you're going to have way more opportunities that you could deal with. I promise you. So go follow me on LinkedIn and start following the people that comment on my posts and everybody else in here that that's posting on LinkedIn, and get in the game. And your lack of experience will be something that you could get past. What you need to do, though, is prove that you could also do the hands-on stuff. So I would also, in addition to the certs, I would get that GitHub profile set up and maybe a couple of repos in there where, maybe it's Terraform configuration or ARM template and a nice thing. Go check out my GitHub if you want a reference. I got some pinned repos there. That's what I'm looking for, that type of stuff. When I see that, I'm like, wow, all right, this person, they're hungry. So I like this.
I was talking to one of the Twitter, what do they call it, tweets. talking to the person, and she was mentioning that she didn't had any cloud skills, but how she started was she started working on side projects, and she then started publishing on her LinkedIn profile saying, hey, this is what I have done. It's present on GitHub. Go check out my.
That's what I was saying. Sorry, I'll just wrap that up real quick. When I was showing that slide, like Windows 2000 CDs, that's exactly how I got off the help desk. I was building domain controllers, and when I was in an interview, the guy's like, you're the only person I've talked to that knows this stuff. You're hired. It's like, so yeah, to back up your point, that's what you need to do is start doing hands-on and document the journey.
Last question from Max, and then we'll let you go, Mike.
Perfect.
Max.
All right. Thank you, Mike. I was wondering, related to the social media discussion, what do you think isn't getting as much traction in the community, like is not being as discussed as it should be?
Yeah, are you wondering about a technical topic or a non-technical topic?
Anything. Because I know it tends to be sort of almost a group think of everybody's looking at the same thing's getting discussed.
Right. Well, I think honestly, your unique perspective is the best thing that you can put out. What's your hot take, your 2 cents on what's going on, and because that will attract people. Like, man, Max is really like thinking about this stuff. He's got opinions, and that's what I would do. Because going back to the point before, just because something has been done or hasn't been done doesn't really mean anything, right? So it's kind of like I would follow your, like, sounds cheesy, follow your heart. Like, what does your gut say? Like, how, if you're breaking into cloud, what were you doing at the last place or currently that you can map over there and help other people that are in the same position? Because if you got it, there's like thousands of people out there that are in the same position. So I would map it to your own personal journey. If you're getting certified, like, you should talk about your process of doing that and and then also sharing when you passed and giving something to the audience that they can use to do the same thing. So I know it's kind of a high level answer, but there's just so much tech. Like, you could go all day doing tutorials, and you should, but like pepper in your unique perspective. And that's what I would say. Like, imagine you're teaching it to yourself that was a couple years behind you. What would you need like a few years ago? That's what I would think about.
There's a video, there's a session that Scott Henselman takes. It's called the Social Developer. It doesn't necessarily apply just for cloud carrier, but just go and check Social Developer. I really like one of the references he take is this universe is built with dark matter, but there are few stars. The universe is actually being built of the dark matter. If dark matter is not there, universe will not exist. But it's only the stars which go and do GitHub, Twitter, LinkedIn, because of which we see the light. That's the only difference. The actual work is all done by dark matter. So go and check out. I'll see if I can find the link to his video. He has presented it at so many locations.
That's cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. This session was great. I hope everyone who attended this session would have learned a lot from you. If you are not following Mike on LinkedIn and Twitter, please go ahead and do so. I would highly encourage you to do so. And with that, I like, on the behalf of the user group, Mike, thank you once again for taking time out. I really appreciate it. And we look forward to see you again in future. And our next meeting will take place in 2 weeks. I'll be posting details shortly in a day or two. And with that, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Really excited to be here today. It's good to be back, and appreciate it. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.